Let's go ahead and start. I think I just checked, it was 75 attendees for this, but you never know how many of them they would like to see it on the video. So it is my pleasure to have Dr. Harris from College of Nursing coming, and we had to cancel it, as you guys last Friday, just simply because of the snowing that she got in Boston. So, but very brief about Dr. Harris is a specialty coordinator for the UMS Adult Gerontology Primary Care Nurse Practitioner Program. She's a co-PI on the HRSA grant and also PI of another grant. She has done an excellent scholarly activity, including several of publications. So I'm going to save her time and let her take over.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. And I apologize for the inconvenience of last Friday, but we're here today. So I want to say that I have no conflict of interest, and we are going to be talking today about education grants. So I like to start all my slides with, all my presentations for grant work with this slide. When I just started out writing grants, I had someone I read about, and this was Dr. Barbara Resnick. And she was at a conference that I was asked at, and I thought, I don't know her, but I'm going to ask her questions about grant writing. And I was applying for Hartford Scholarship. And she ended our conversation with this quote: "A grant means someone believes in you." She said, the money's great, but when someone believes in you, that's a really good feeling. And that has stuck with me ever since then, and I'm thankful that she said that to me, because it is more than the money. And I'm thankful to everyone who has funded me, our UMS College of Nursing, our UMS Administrative Office. I had a National Center for Interprofessional Practice and Education grant that we're winding down, and a HRSA grant that we're winding down, and I at one point had a GAPNA grant. So I'm very fortunate and thankful to the funders. So objectives for today are, by the end of this presentation, we will be able to explain one strategy for building an academic partnership, discuss one element for team building, and describe one benefit for students, academic centers, community partnerships due to education research. So we'll have some post-test questions at the end and an opportunity to participate. So think about about building academic partnerships, funding sources, and strategies for building a team. Brief history about myself. I am a gerontological nurse practitioner. I also teach nurses to become nurse practitioners. I have a passion for older adults, and that has guided my research. So that passion has been tied to my research efforts, and I feel like I can make a difference. I have done a lot of practice. I'm like you. Are all of you in here health science educators, or in some way educating students, some way, or students? So we're health science educators for the most part, it sounds like, but we can make a difference with grant writing. And there are education research, often called program grants out there, or trainee grants. We're responsible for training the workforce. And students, I had a mentor tell me one time, students will be no better than their mentors. And I think that might be true, that we have to be the leaders. And a lot of times I think health science educators don't always have a lot of support for grant writing, or maybe encouragement to do so. So that's what I want to do today, is just encourage you as health science educators to take a leadership role, and we can make a difference for our students. Okay. So it all starts with vision. For me anyway, vision and wanting to make a difference. So that has led me in my grant work to see what the possibilities. As health science educators, we can see the possibilities for our students, for our patients, but let's today see the possibilities for ourselves to be able to write grants. We see opportunities for our students. Let's see opportunity for ourselves. And grant work, obtaining a grant is one way to provide opportunities for our students that we might not have otherwise have. I'm writing a program grant right now, an education trainee grant, and it's exciting because I'm thinking to myself, I can actually write this and I can teach differently. I can teach how I want to. I can, this will be an opportunity for me to do some teaching that I've wanted to do, to design it. I don't have to do things the same old way. And the funding is going to help us with that. So as health science educators, we have the pieces. We just need to connect them with the funding. I am on a committee for geropsychiatric mental health for older adults. And we're on a think tank. And that's what I was doing in Boston, as a matter of fact. We had grant officers there, and there were more health science educators. There were some researchers there, but for the most part, health science educators. And we were talking with grant officers about funding opportunities. Can we word it this way? Because if you don't have the funding opportunity there for you, you can't apply for the grant that you need to make a difference. For example, on geropsychiatric nursing and geropsychiatry, we wanted to look at mental health promotion. So we asked the grant officers, can we have more grants on mental health promotion for older adults? So we had some input into that. And that is a great opportunity for no matter what discipline you're in, if it's medicine, nursing, psychiatry, physician assistant. We looked into these training grants because that's what's going to make a difference. And especially, I think about our state. So where do we begin? With the end in mind. I think we need to begin at the beginning, but we also need to look forward and be forward thinking about what we can do, just like what I was doing in Boston, trying to advise, or as a group we did this, trying to give our input into funding opportunities for trainee grants. So how will I receive funding? Well, exactly what is happening today, we are very fortunate to be at UAMS, to have an infrastructure and to have opportunities like this to learn how to write grants and how to know where we can look for funding sources and learn from others. So that's one way. So we are fortunate to be here at UAMS to do that. We're not alone. Find a mentor. Find somebody you can bounce ideas off of. And that is one of the first steps. Who will fund my idea? There's all kinds of program grants out there and trainee grants. I will suggest one. Some of the grant opportunities that I've had have not always been very large grants. Some of them have been foundation grants. The Josiah Macy Foundation. If you go on their website and you want to make a difference as a health science educator, you can find an opportunity for them. In fact, I believe if you go on their website, I believe their applications are going to be accepted in February. I could be wrong about that. But, go on their website and look at that. There's program grant opportunities with the Josiah Macy Foundation. And all these foundations are somehow connected at times. Like my IPE grant was funded by John A. Hartford Center, the Josiah Macy Foundation, the Charles and Betty Moore Foundation, and the National Center for Interprofessional Education. So who will fund my ideas? Look for HRSA grants as well. Sometimes you find them with foundation grants, and they're not always large, but they're generous. It's generous of foundations to fund us to teach our students. We need to convince the funders why we should be funded. So that, I think, is one of the most difficult tasks, but in a way, I'm going to tell you how easy it is. It can be. There is competition. You want funders to listen and to take you seriously. So how do we do that? I say start small. One thing that we can do to begin grant writing is there are intramural grant opportunities here at UAMS, and I have had 2 of them, and I've built on those, and they have been the jumping board onto much larger grants. I had a intramural grant here to help reduce antipsychotic medications. And that led to another grant from the Gerontological Advanced Practice Nursing Foundation. I had an intramural grant generously funded by UMS to look at mHealth, and Jennifer's been a part of that. And we have a publication coming out on that, and I was a part of a larger $1.9 million HRSA grant. So these smaller grants, disseminate, try for them. Funders love to see that you've tried, that you can manage a budget, that you have actually been successful, that you have results. So that's where I would say to begin. So that's why it's good to be here at UAMS. Innovation is very, very important. And as health science educators, we have good ideas. We just need to get them in motion. So, for example, for my interprofessional education grant that I received, they liked our idea of geriatric mental health. We wrote a grant to screen for depression in older adults. They liked that idea. No one was doing it. And we needed that to happen. And we were able to convince them. HRSA grants like that. There's all kinds of telehealth and telemedicine grants out there that are available. But it all begins with a literature review. We need to convince the researcher, the funders. And how did I do that? Well, with our IPE grant. I don't know if everybody knows this, but mental health is a global problem in every country for older adults. Suicide is higher for older adults in every single country. Suicide rates are higher in every state in the United States. And that's been this way since the 90s. In Arkansas, we have a higher suicide rate for older adults than New Mexico, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Texas, Missouri. So it was convincing to the funders that we needed to do this, and that I had other grant opportunities and publications out there, and they look at that. So do your scholarly work, write articles. As health science educators, that's one of the mistakes we don't want to make, is disseminating our work. We're working hard with students. And as a student, if there's any students out here, you're working hard. I'm sure you have a publication out there that would be impressive, that can be a jumping board to a larger grant. So we must convince the grant funders. And we do that through our literature review. Synergy. Here at UAMS, as I said, we have great opportunities, but grant funders these days love to look for community partnerships. So how do we do that? I'll give you an example out of my own work. Universities, we provide the training. We know how to do that. We do that well as health science educators. Some of us are even in practice. Some of us are in the research arena. But we can do more if we have support for community. As a matter of fact, at UAMS, that's our goal. We want to help our community. We want to help older Arkansans, or Arkansans in general. We want to be making a difference in our own state. And that's the good that we can do, is train our workforce. Well, in my situation, I went to the Arkansas Healthcare Association. They partnered with us. We partnered with 12th Street. We partnered with North Street. We had our community partners. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't have a space to carry out our research. So look around, find someone who has a common interest with you, and we need to reach out into the community. Whatever your discipline is, whatever you want to investigate, we need our community. We need to be making a difference in our community. As an academic center, we have things the community needs. And the community has things they need from us. So it's kind of a reciprocal opportunity for everyone. It is a win-win. It's a win-win for UAMS, it's a win-win for the community, and for our students. We need to build teams. So every member of our team is important. Every single person. Look around and see those people that you could maybe draw in that might help support. For our HRSA grant, we have a technology expert. We have experts in from the Office of Distance, OED, from OED that helped us. We did some modules, and they lended their support to us to do some modules for us. So out there, there's all kinds of opportunity. Just look around. We have resources and that we can all share with each other. So we need a shared vision. My vision, your vision, our vision together with our community. What excites you? What do you want to do? And share that with community partners. You have to take risks. I placed a phone call to the CEO of the Arkansas Healthcare Association. I don't talk with CEOs every day, and I had to do that. So, and it can be successful. So once you have your community partner, which is your first step, then think about your research question. What is a shared research question between your community partner, UMS, your own personal interest that could help our students and prepare our workforce? For me, it was the geriatric mental health. Everyone was on board with that. And then we got the funders on board. So that's very important, to have a solid, strong research question that stays focused. And we got our funders on board because we were doing this interprofessionally. Without the interprofessional piece, the funders wouldn't have looked at us. But we did an interprofessional approach to screening for geriatric mental health. And we kept the focus on our students. And that's a good place to start. You look at your outcomes. What's your shared vision? What are your outcomes that you want to achieve? And so that was my second step, writing down those outcomes. What do I want to do more than anything else? And get those outcomes in place so that it's shared by everyone. Then you look at your budget. So those are three important things: your research question, your outcomes, and your budget. I tried to do the outcomes and the budget very early on. What do I want to measure? What am I going to invest? What's realistic? So that's very important. And members of the team. How do we fund members of the team, and what percentage of each? How can we work together? Because you can't go much further than your budget. So, sometimes you have a small budget. You make it work. And sometimes you have larger budgets. So that is certainly an important consideration. And it's important to stay on top of that. This is money that people have given in trust, to our trust. And so I'm very careful about that. And I examine my budget frequently to make sure things are in order. Yes?
I just want to mention regarding of the budget, I think that the percent of the effort is very important.
Yes.
Just making sure that they put exactly 10% of their time, not to put 80% and do 10%.
Right.
Because that's a big plus for the review.
Exactly. Sometimes they won't fund. Sometimes they won't even fund 50%.
Right.
You have to read your grant guidelines to see what they will fund. Just wrote one the other day and had to go by those funding parameters. They wouldn't fund 50% of the time, so you have to find a way to balance all that out, and that's a very important point. Grant funders will look at your budget. They like to see, especially foundation grants, don't oftentimes like to see a lot of your budget go to salary. They like to see it going to, for instance, the population, the older adult population, or your students. They don't like to see big salaries on there.
Excuse me. This is the Northwest Campus. Can I remind you would you please repeat the questions for us, because we can't hear.
Sure, I'm sorry.
What the audience is saying. Thanks a lot.
Yes. Well, if you want to repeat it. He'll repeat it for you. I'm sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear
No.
me, Sherry?
Yeah, now
Can
we
you?
can. You're right there.
Okay. Okay, so my question was, on the base of the grant, you cannot put huge percent of your effort while your work is probably 10% actual work you are doing. The grant reviewer, they have a budget officer that they are looking step by step on a single dollar that you are proposing to do. So we have to be really careful with the percent of the effort you are putting. Actually, that's what is going to get done. Am I correct?
Absolutely, yes. So, sometimes...
Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. So sometimes we have to make an adjustment in time and effort. Sometimes, sometimes our aims, our outcomes have to be scaled back a little bit, and then we'll put them toward another grant. So here's the scientific method, just what we've gone through. Research question, have a good background literature review to support and convince your funders, and do this in a succinct way. Make every single word count, because we do have page limits anyway, but I like to make every word count and have it go through an internal and external review. That can make you very successful in writing your grant, and we do have those mechanisms. In fact, we have, I don't know about other colleges, but we have a green sheet that we fill out, and we put down who we would like to choose for our internal or an external reviewer. That can make us very successful and make those words count and be succinct. Have a good hypothesis, testing and intervention, and then the last one down here, report your results. We have asked people to participate in a funding opportunity, whether it's our students or patients or whomever it might be, and we owe it to them to disseminate our work. They helped us. They worked through a funding opportunity with us, an intervention. We need to disseminate our work, and sometimes that can go by the wayside, and so we need to be working on that and count that into our time for the grant period. Look at your population. Mine is, of course, older adults, so the grant must be relevant to that and relevant to what the funders would like. They like to see population health these days, so what is your population, and think about how you can best do that. And as a health science educator, I think we're in a very good, unique position to do that. Our study design, many times education grants they can be research, they can also be quality improvement. So as a health science educator, we're always looking to improve. And sometimes a survey design, if you don't have very much money, sometimes a survey will work, an anonymous survey. And there's mechanisms to do that. Timetable. After you have figured out who your partner is, and you have your budget down, and you have your outcomes that you want to meet, there's a timetable. We can't take forever to do it. The grant funding ends. So to try to keep on task, and I think even though I've said have a big vision, sometimes you have to have also put some realism in there as well, because there will be other opportunities. So it has to be realistic with your timetable. And just like I said, be realistic with a timetable so you can finish the work. Don't try to do too much that's not feasible. Try to scale that back. That's why you do pilot studies, to work out all of the kinks before you do, ask for funding, bigger funding. And that helps quite a bit. With our mHealth study, we had to come up with protocols. And so pilot work really helps with that, because that's very important when you want to take the next step. Future directions, as I said from the beginning, with the end in mind, even the future in mind. What do you want to do next? And so make sure that every step of the way you're building on something that you want to do for the future and for future opportunities. There are pitfalls along the way. I will tell you just briefly, because I don't want to go over too much time. I've got 5 more minutes here. So one of the pitfalls for our education grant, there's several, but I'll tell you one of them. If you partner with a community partner and then somehow that falls through, have a backup plan. That can be detrimental to the work, is if somebody falls through, the interest is not there. Sometimes you have people leave UAMS. So what's the backup plan? Those sorts of things. Sometimes with our HRSA grant, we had a plan in place, however. It was, you tried it. If it didn't work, you improvised. You told them what you did to make things different. Sometimes you have unintended outcomes. We did virtual site visits with our students. We didn't really set out to do that. And it just happened that it worked really well, that we could use telehealth software. And as a matter of fact, this afternoon, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have students connect with me from different parts of Arkansas, screening for depression in an older adult this afternoon. We didn't start out thinking we'd ever be able to connect Texarkana and Little Rock and Searcy and students from everywhere. So that was a good unintended outcome, and sometimes it just works like that. But sometimes there's the pitfalls, and we have to be ready for them, not be discouraged, and that's where your good team building comes into place, because it just seems like with our HRSA grant, people just picked up. We had something that got in the way. Okay, this person will pick up. Technology didn't work. Okay, we'll go around that. We're not going to let that make the whole thing fall through. So we found other ways to improvise. So just to kind of go over, innovation's the key. Nothing can replace a good idea. And we all have good ideas, just getting them in motion. Take risks. Call the CEO if you need to. If you need a community partner, people are happy to do it. Sometimes innovation can be the simple traditional things. One of my grants I did, it wasn't an education grant, but it's a good example. I did massages for older adults in nursing homes to measure their sleep. Well, massage is pretty old. I mean, that's an old idea, but it was new because no one had really tried to do that and really put some teeth into it and measure sleep objectively. So that's an example of how something old can actually be new. So what's your innovation? Who will best support your innovation? Who's going to come along with you and make things happen? Aligning those objectives and goals with your innovation. Who are your partners? Because we will do much more if we can partner. And how does this eventually benefit the population of students or older adults or whomever you are passionate about serving? I like this, to end with this. Success is not final. So just because you had one success doesn't mean that's great, but we want to build on our successes. Failure's not fatal. Something doesn't happen. Well, we'll go around it. It is the courage to continue that counts. So I just want to encourage everyone in here, if you've never written a grant before, you have the innovation to, in your mind. Just reach out there, take advantage of opportunities like this. We can always learn more, and find people you can bounce ideas off of, and a supportive environment, and you can make a difference and make it happen. So now's the time to answer our questions. Can we explain one way to build an academic partnership? Maybe a distance sites in Northwest Arkansas. Feel free to participate as well. We'll get the mic around here if anyone wants to offer some suggestions that we can all learn from. Can you think of one way to build an academic partnership? Any new ideas out there?
Maybe I'm naive.
Here, 1 second.
Thank you. Is it on? Maybe I'm naive, but what do you mean academic partnership? Do you mean working with different departments?
Well, that would be one thing, but I mean I should have put the word community. Academic community partnerships. One way that we can think outside the box, get outside of our own environment. Can you think of one partner or one way to do that maybe I haven't mentioned?
My first thought is I would go to Google and type in Little Rock nonprofits, because I don't know, nonprofits are about helping the community, so that's what pops into my head.
Well, that's a good suggestion, but there is actually a website you can go to. I just used it the other day because we're writing a grant right now and we want nonprofits. There's actually a website. You can type in an organization and find out if they're nonprofit or not, and you can know where to go. So that is a very good suggestion. Okay, name at least one funding source for educational research. Does anybody have any other ideas besides HRSA or Macy Foundation?
Department of Education, they have all kinds of education.
Absolutely, yes. Our Office of OED was so helpful. We, here at UAMS, we did some modules, and they made us look way better than we really were. I mean, they put in some animation, and it was very effective for our students. Okay, name one strategy for team building. How can we build a successful team? No real ideas, haven't thought about it. I think building a successful team is looking out there and trying to find people that maybe you don't even know and asking them, what's your interest? I've read about your interests. I've seen your work. Be familiar with what's going on around us and the community, and even here at UAMS. And try to build a team that way. But before you get started too far down the road, that's really very important, is to have everyone have the same shared vision, shared values. All right, I'll just Jennifer.
So what you just said just now leads me to think about, I don't mean to get too specific, but to think about the HRSA grant and how you're in the College of Nursing. I'm all the way in the College of Medicine across campus, but I was on your team as well as another member of my department. So how did that happen?
We just reached out to the Office of Rural Health. You know, who's out there? You know, we've had research assistants that we just reached out. So we advertised too. You know, so we just find people that you think, wow, you know, it's kind of word of mouth sometimes too. Oh, I know somebody over here that might be interested, which is actually how I found one of our, for a while, one of our research assistants. And we actually, it was very much a win-win for that person because they were on one grant and they didn't have quite enough money to support that, but we filled in. So that person actually was very much a win-win for that research assistant, and who are very important to the projects that we do. Any other questions?
I think the other thing is if you go to UMS profile, everybody has their own keywords, and you will find who really responsible and what they are doing. I think that's another way of recently you can find it out. And UMS is a small community. And if you attend their seminars or, participate in their research activity, pretty fast you know who's doing what. And, and no grant, as I said before, no grant gets funded by one person. You need to have a team. And it doesn't mean that everybody has to have the expertise as a PI is. You need to have somebody with technology background. You need somebody to have with a statistical background. You need somebody with, a whole host of things. So I think that's why is making a team building. And the reviewer, they are looking at it. I mean, if you go to a grant that they are looking who's responsible for what and what their background is.
That's exactly true. You have to have qualifications to be on a grant, to be at any role, any role. And every role is important, for sure.
Another comment I just want to make that we are living in the state of Arkansas, which we are number one on all kinds of diseases. So I think you don't need to go too far, and the data are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm reviewing and you are talking about the highest level of the cardiovascular disease in a population, or diabetic, or obesity, whatever, I do pay attention to it rather than saying you are number 10 or 15 or 20 in the States.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have all of those data, and either the health department, they have it. You can dig in from ACI, for example, get all of those health data. Those are very powerful tools to use.
And people stand up to attention, like the example I gave for the rate of older adult suicide. It seems like suicide is, unfortunately, more of a problem, but it's always been a problem for older adults since 1990s. We've got to do something. So I love to participate in grant work because it gives you freedom to make a difference. And, I think if you want to get involved, then I have my card. There's other people in our College of Nursing. Sometimes people don't always look to nursing, to write grants. But nurses are very open to other disciplines. We have other disciplines on our HRSA grant. So, and our APE grant, we went across campus. We went to College of Pharmacy, College of Medicine, Office of Rural Health. We reached out everywhere. So.
Hi, this is Jennifer on the Northwest campus. We were wondering if you could give an example of how generally you utilized a grant. We were confused if it was education of patients or education of students,
Mm-hmm.
and how that works with the grant funding, et cetera.
Most of mine have been education of students, the IPE grant, and that's an important point. I had big ideas for older adults, and we included some of that in our grant funding work. But the ones that I'm talking about basically today and given examples of today were our IPE grant, our HRSA grant, which focused on advanced practice nurses. The IPE grant was interprofessional, so it was educating nurses, physicians, physician assistants, pharmacy, to all work together. So we had to resonate with everyone on those grounds. That's why we came up with modules that were interprofessional. So our outcomes were based on, can we interprofessionally screen for depression in older adults? Those were our outcomes. Although the underlying reason we did this is because there is a great need, and we wanted students to see the great need. We did simulations with our students. We did videos where students got together and put themselves in the place of the older adult. What else did we do? Quite a few different things like that. We did the virtual screening like we're doing this afternoon interprofessionally. So we kept our focus on the student, although someday, hopefully once we get grounded with our education, prepare our workforce, we're ready to do something else with the patients. Our HRSA grant had to be focused on nurse practitioners, but we put an interprofessional focus on that with including other disciplines as well. So yes, I see what your point is. Were we educating the student, or were we educating the patient? So we had to keep focus. Our outcomes had to be focused for those grants on our students.
Just one comment. I think you educate the patient, but the benefit was for students to get educated, so they can have a better practice and understanding what the mental health means for them. So seems is double win for this type of grants, that both population they get the benefits.
It's a win-win.
Yeah.
It is. Robert Wood Johnson was another funder for our IP grant, and they're all about health equity and health population health. So we wouldn't have probably received that grant if we wouldn't have included our population health. Did I answer your question, Northwest Arkansas? I think it's Jennifer.
Yeah.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
All right. So
Yes, sir.
So I'm not too familiar with, with what you did for the Robert Wood Johnson grant, for example, for IPE. Could you walk through the process a little bit? So what
Sure.
was your idea? What were the outcomes that you were measuring in the students? Those kinds of things, that
Okay.
bolts of it.
Yeah. I know I spoke about how high suicide rates are. We really, you need a lot of funding and a different type of grant to actually show an impact for reducing suicide rates. You need a longer period of time than we had. So we couldn't really do that, but you can't reduce suicide rates unless you teach people how to screen, and they look for that and they screen for that. So our outcomes were to teach all disciplines to screen for depression and how to do that. So our first step was we created modules, and students logged on and took those modules. Then they attended a simulation, and there are not very many simulations for geriatric mental health, because those simulations are not like other simulations. You can't just have a mannequin. You've got to have a standardized patient. So we had to train a standardized patient. We had a scenario that we developed, faculty developed, and we had students, we had to coordinate all the student schedules, which is not easy to do. So we had faculty who were very flexible, because nursing's on a different track than medicine, than pharmacy. So to get everybody together and joining together to do this was a major accomplishment. So we had them go through a simulation. Then we had the teams go out once they were educated with the modules, once they did the simulation. Then we dispersed the teams to educate interprofessionally. We had tools. There's a tool called ICAS that is the interprofessional competency. It's an assessment screening tool that they answered pre and post tests to see how well they worked together as a team, and if they did, and we have very positive outcomes on that. So we measured student progress along the way with those with those tools to see if they did work together as a team. We did some subjective comments and surveys. We had pre-test, post-tests on our modules. Then after, we had discussions, interprofessional discussions, and we talked about what was your experience when you screened for depression? What did you learn from other disciplines? We had questions like that we asked them, in addition to the IPE tools that we used. Does that help? Yes, ma'am.
So I just have a follow-up of that. Then, did you have like a centralized focused research question, or was this project more geared toward looking at the efficacy of methods that you were using or quality improvement?
Okay, that is a good question. I know there's such an intersection here. Quality improvement was actually based on education quality improvement, more than the quality improvement at the clinic, although we did use the clinic and we did get patient satisfaction, but that wasn't our main goal. Our main goal is how can we teach interprofessionally, and what are our methods to do that? And like I mentioned, getting all the schedules to mesh together was very difficult. Everybody's on a different rotation. Everybody's at a different level. You've got beginning pharmacy students and med students about to graduate, and nurse practitioner students somewhere in the middle of their education. So just meshing all those schedules together was one major accomplishment that we did see. Our own quality improvement as faculty, and then can we even work together to screen interprofessionally? Will adults even accept that? Because if you've got a pharmacy student, a medical student, a nurse practitioner, that's 3 people. How will they respond to that? And then we did some of it virtual. How do they respond to like we're doing this afternoon, an iPad, a student somewhere, and, students on site. And so we tried different methods. We also tried looking at remote simulation. So up in Northwest Arkansas, we had our standardized patient here at Little Rock. We had students in Northwest Arkansas, and we looked at, was it any different if it was on-site or remote? So we had 3 different groups. We did a remote site simulation where the standardized patient was here, the students were in Northwest Arkansas. We had a combined group where we tested the simulation and the learning outcomes for students here and in Northwest Arkansas, and then we had just one group that was here. So, and when we did our statistical analysis, there was no difference in student learning outcomes when we tested that. So yes, it was, if you're talking about quality improvement, it's our quality improvement here amongst faculty. Does that help?
It does. That's been a challenge in my experience. It does help. That's been a challenge in my experience, is defining the comparisons and the controls so that my educational project can qualify as research and
Yes.
not just me investigating the effectiveness of a method. So
Right.
that's helpful. Thank you.
Right. And that was kind of what I just described to you, our remote, combined, and on-site monitoring when we did our analysis of that. That was kind of an unintended outcome. We did it out of necessity because we wanted our grant work to be sustainable. So it's not sustainable to everybody get in a van and go to Northwest Arkansas or bring Northwest Arkansas down here. That's not cost effective, and that doesn't really, that doesn't lead to sustainability. And like I mentioned at the beginning, there wasn't really another way to do a simulation for geriatric mental health because mannequins can't talk to you. And so what's cost effective? The next limb of our study that we have not investigated is we did several tapings, and so we're looking to see will a taped version work with our students, or do they need more interaction?
Hi,
Any other
one more
questions?
question.
Yes.
Northwest Campus, we were wondering how you basically allocate the funding. For example, what a sample budget would look like in this case for an educational grant for the one you just discussed.
Okay, I wish I would have brought it because this one was very complex. We had a match from our administrative office, from the provost office. So we had one pot of money that came from the provost that generously supported us. We had another part that was from the College of Nursing that they contributed. And then we had what the funders contributed. So we actually had 3 different segments of a budget looking here, going along here. And so it was very complex. We actually did it with color coding, and I really wish I would have brought it now that you brought that up, because it was very complex to kind of stay on track with that. And, the funders wanted to make sure that we met our match because we promised to do that, and we certainly did. So each of the matches were separately analyzed, and we did that from the onset. What does the provost want to fund? What does the College of Nursing? What can they fund? And then what would we use the remaining funds for from the funder?
I think our question is more, where were those funds allocated, not where they came from. So how much went to faculty salaries, how much went to supplies, how much went to paying the patients, etc.
Did students get paid?
Did students get paid for participating?
No, students did not get paid for participating. Again, this was a foundation grant, so we didn't allocate a lot to salary. We did this through in kind, and that was the funding from the provost and from the College of Nursing. We only had one salary, and that was for our research or our research assistant, actually, that coordinated a lot of things. So most of our funding went to, we did iPads for our students. The simulations, of course, cost a lot. So it all went, most of our funding went toward the students, not toward salaries, which salary is what you need sometimes, but we didn't do that. That was generously matched by our provost and our College of Nursing. Does that help? I mean, there was a lot of technology involved here. So we had standardized patient, we had iPads, we actually had to have hotspots because when you get in rural areas and you're screening, you have to have good internet connection.
Just want to mention that a lot of foundations, they don't pay salary for the faculty.
Right.
So we need to read the RFA to make sure, especially in the budget segment, they will explain that. For example, some government agency, they would like to have 70% of the total cost to be on the supplies and other expenses, and 30% on the salary. So everything, I think, is explained in the RFA for the grant.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, we're writing one now where we're writing for stipends, and like I said, they like to see that going back to the students and what we can do if we just had a little extra. So it's generous.
Can you comment on any issues you have with allocation of time when you think about teaching load and then adding the research piece on top of that? What did that process look like for you? For this grant, you do have to take that into consideration because you made a promise. We made a promise that we would, however much we allocated, that we were going to do. And I'm sensitive to that. So you make some adjustments for this grant. For these education grants, we worked a lot of it into the actual curriculum for our students. For my course, it was just a part of the curriculum. So that kind of helped with not doing something extra, so-called extra. Does that kind of answer your question? We wanted it to be sustainable. So we're not just going to do the grant. When it's over with, we're not going to do this anymore. We made it we integrated into our curriculum. And that was part of what the College of Nursing and the provost funded was the salary, the time that we needed to invest to do that. But it was more of an in-kind arrangement. For our HRSA grant, it's the same way. It's supposed to be sustainable. And you're right, there is a certain amount of the research aspect that you have to take into consideration. So there's some allocating of maybe, whatever the grant will allow you, 20%. How long does it take to write the reports and to do all that? But that's why we have a research assistant. Some of that falls on them too. They're very important. Otherwise, the work doesn't get done, because you don't have time as faculty. You can't spread yourself so thin. So a lot of the collecting of the data and getting the spreadsheets ready and all of that went to our research assistant. We utilize them well.
Any other question? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.